Well, good day and welcome to you. It is March the 10th. I hope you're all having a wonderful day wherever you happen to be. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to welcome you to this channel and just take a brief moment to encourage anybody who wants to know more about this information upon hearing these videos to investigate this information for yourself. I have about 400 and something videos where I talk about this and share my own personal experiences with Maitreya. I even bring on different speakers to talk about their take on this story or their own personal experiences. But there is a wealth of information on the internet where you can see for yourself if there's any truth to this. So hopefully you'll take advantage of it. Now, you don't have to look at the links that I provided, but I try to make it easier for whoever cares to look at it to do such that, but it's important, I think, upon hearing this, if you think there might be something to this for for yourself or for the world or whatever, to just take a deeper look at it, investigate it for yourself. And then you can see if there's any truth to it. And then if you do see if there's any truth to this information on whatever level, you can make an honest decision on how to proceed. And that's really, I think, the intention of putting these videos up. So the other intention of putting these videos up is to try to answer questions that people have. So I actually have some questions to cover in this video that I think are really thought-provoking and are really the kind of questions that I prefer to try to address because of the nature of what they're asking versus it just being about their belief versus what I believe. I don't like to argue with people's beliefs because I have no quarrel with what people or you or whoever believe about whatever. I'm just sharing my own take on things. So you can either believe this or not. So all this information is really just being presented to be considered and considered only. So haven't mentioned that in a while, but that's kind of like a standing rule of this channel. I'm just throwing this out there for you to look at. All right, now let's dive into the video. Now the questions that I'm being asked that I'll try to answer are in reference to the war in Ukraine. I put a video maybe a week or so ago about the invasion of Ukraine. What the masters think. Well, this person, XXYX, which I'm sure that's just their YouTube name. I'm sure their mother doesn't call them up on the phone and refer to them as that. Or that's not the name on their birth certificate, which is fine. You know what I'm saying? I'm not expecting their real name. But anyway, XXYX asked, when is Maitreya coming on the scene? What is he waiting for? And how much worse can it get before he intervenes? Okay, so I'm going to try to answer these questions simply, and then I'll try to elaborate a little bit. So hopefully this will shed some light on these questions, because I'm sure you're not the only one that are asking these questions, not only Maitreya, but of whatever deity they worship. Now, I'm not saying that this person's worshiping Maitreya. Let me be clear about that. But, of course, there are Christians who say the same thing to Jesus. Catholics say the same thing to Jesus or God or the saints or Mother Mary, Muslims, I'm sure, are saying the same thing about, to Allah. When is this going to, how much worse is this going to get before you send help and those kind of things? It's a universal cry, really. And it's the cry that actually invoked the masters and the Christ to come back in the world when they did, believe it or not. So it's you're not the only one who has these concerns. You're just asking me because, we talk about Maitreya and the masters of wisdom. Now, when is Maitreya coming on the scene? He is already here. He's already been interviewed on TV multiple times all around the world, in the United States, in Europe, even in Russia, in Asia and so forth like that, Australia. I'm sure he's still giving interviews or talks or being interviewed on the internet or whatever it happens to be, because when he even made the announcement that he was on TV, TV was like the biggest thing. Now I don't think people really watch TV in that way. They really watch it on the internet. So more than likely, he's probably giving interviews on the internet some kind of way. Now, he's not being introduced as Maitreya. He's being introduced as an ordinary person. So it would make it a little harder for any one of us to recognize him as Maitreya, because he doesn't look like the pictures that I have, like this picture of him with the white headdress. That's just how he appeared in Nairobi, Kenya. Now, the eyes might be the same, but he doesn't look like that. He's not wearing that on TV. It would make it really easy if he was wearing that on TV, but he doesn't. He was only wearing that because that's what that religious group was expecting their teacher to come back as. Well, actually, they saw him as Jesus. But anyway, the other thing is that any one of these masters, and Maitreya is very adept at this too, is he can say things in a way that will keep him from being recognized as anything but just an ordinary person. And yet those words will come from his heart right into the heart of the listener and start to wake up the listener's heart, kind of subverting it, the wall that we all put up, the prejudice that we all put up about whatever somebody else says or something like that, or how they look, or, that kind of thing, where it penetrates their heart and starts to work within their heart. And the times that I've seen Maitreya, I've seen him many times in my own life. There were other people around that had no idea who he was, didn't recognize. And when I told them, this is what and even some of the Share International group people were around at the time, they didn't recognize him either. So he has a way of speaking to, and there were times that I'm sorry, let me go back. There were also times that I saw him that I didn't recognize him, but other people did. And when they told me what he said, I was like, oh, that makes sense. But I didn't even think that it was Maitreya. So I didn't approach him in that way or anything. I just saw him as an ordinary person. So he has a way of doing this. The other thing is, the media, as flawed as it is humanity's representatives. It's the way that we communicate with one another. And as corrupt as it is, and as, like I said, as flawed as it is, that's what we got. Alternative, corporate, whatever, whichever way you look at it. So if a representative in the media or journalist is interviewing him, and that person doesn't think to ask him that question, then that would mean that humanity's not ready to get that answer. So he's not going to insert something in there that would not be received. These masters never infringe upon our free will, ever, not once. And this is it's just a concept for even those people who've heard it from Benjamin Creme for years, not to infringe upon our free will, because we all infringe upon each other's free will. It's like a natural way humanity operates. These masters don't do that. So it makes it kind of illogical why they would not do something like this, but they don't. They don't ever, ever, ever infringe upon anyone's free will, a disciple, someone listening on TV, a nation, the world, ever. But and these masters have even said this, even if it meant that the person would learn the lesson faster, they still don't do it. They have nothing but patience and love for humanity in that way. So it's just we will know more about how to work within that law of of cause and effect and not infringing upon free will in the future. But right now, it's like it makes no sense, right? Why would you not do that? Now, the other thing is, Maitreya might not be allowing the interviewer to ask those questions. These masters are very adept at pulling they can read people's minds like a book. And if the question is about to come up, they can actually pull it from that person's mind so they don't think to ask the question. And then when Maitreya is off wherever he is, away from that person, that question might come back in their mind. And there's a book I read. It's the Essene. I think it's the Gospel of Peace. I think is the name of the. I think it's the Gospel of Peace, not the Gospel of Truth. I always get those confused because it's been years since I've read this book. But it was translated from the Dead Sea Scrolls about the teachings and life of Jesus. And of course, this isn't what was really written in the Bible, but it was a lot. Like I said, a lot about his alternative teachings about healing, about fasting. It's quite an extraordinary book, but there were instances with people who were coming to hear Jesus speak and had a bunch of questions to ask him. And when Jesus was in their presence, they totally forgot about the questions that they were going to ask. And then once Jesus left, they're like, oh, shoot, I forgot to ask him that question. So Maitreya might even be doing something like that. It might not be time for humanity to ask him that question. I'm just guessing, but this is it. But so it would make it harder for the people to hear what he has to say. I think it's probably, we're still in the stage of him just building that relationship with humanity on TV, where we start to listen more to what he has to say, for maybe is a possibility. But Maitreya, when he speaks heart to heart, it is having an effect on the listener. There are some who don't like what he says, of course. There's some that are maybe unsure. And there's some that are actually probably like, wow, who is this guy? Who is this person on TV speaking these things? So it could be a whole gamut of things. But invariably, most people aren't even aware that the teacher's back. So they're not even thinking him to be that. They might just look at him as an ordinary person. But of course, his, image on TV, what he's saying hasn't gone viral yet. I get it, right? And it's taken a lot longer than even I thought, but it is what it is. Humanity, from one perspective, could look like it's about as galvanized for change as a cesspool, from one perspective. But if you kind of look from a different direction, you can see the change is happening. And that's, I think even in the video, I think it was the video you were referring to, I touched on the fact that one thing that really moved me was seeing this multi-generational group of people marching in the streets in not only Moscow, but St. Petersburg and other cities in Russia, laying their lives on the line, marching against an authoritarian figure like Putin's war, publicly. And how that wouldn't have happened decades ago, because they would have been too scared to do it. Now they're shedding their fear of their own life even for peace. These are heroes that are doing this. But in Europe, they were doing the same thing. In the United States, they were doing the same thing. It's the change is there. It's coming. It's waking up. Humanity is waking up to the problems of the world. We might not see it being, and humanity might not be seeing it. The vast majority of the people might not be seeing it as a direct result of the influence of Maitreya's energies, but esoterically, that's what's happening. So there's hope out there. So relax. It'll be okay. Maitreya says, all will be well. All manner of things will be well. Even if it doesn't seem like it at this time, it's going to be fine. Now, he's not waiting for anything. None of these masters are. They're working moment to moment. We might not see what they're doing. The news might not be reporting on it, but they are doing a lot, right? As much as they can within that law. The Space Brothers are the same thing. They're doing as much as they can within the law of cause and effect and the law of free will, by cleaning up our atmosphere, by cleaning up nuclear radiation, pollution, and everything to keep it sustained until we learn not to do it. But right now it's not known on the news. We're just seeing some UFOs flying around every once in a while and people taking videos of it or pictures of it. But they don't really even know why they're there. But they're there doing these things because they're trying to clean up the environment as much as they can. Now the other thing is, before I get to I think the most important part of your question, okay, what underlies that question, how much worse can it get before he does intervene? That's the question. I think that's the $1 million question when I get to it. But anyway, the masters were planning on coming back into the world like they are right now, 1,000 years from now. And what Maitreya saw right after World War II was, if he didn't come back along with his group of masters far sooner than they had expected, then we would destroy ourselves because we had the nuclear bomb. So my mom was born in 1943. So when she was even born, in her lifetime, it was still planned that Maitreya and these masters would come back 1,000 years from now. So it's not a long time. But they came back, and they're and the process has been slow. It's always slow with humanity. It's not the masters. It's always slow with humanity. And the process is slow, and it's taken a while, And even when Maitreya made the announcement, humanity had to do 3 things in order for him to see that humanity was ready. We had to create a measure of peace. I know it doesn't really look like it, but we apparently did. The principle of sharing had to start governing at least some of the minds of the world leaders at the time, which I think the Marshall Plan was a key to allow Maitreya to come back the way that he did, because that was the first and only time the principle of sharing started to take place, even though it's ended. And this one is really hard to see, but the political parties around the world had to start cleaning house and clean up some of the corruption, right? And they apparently did a little bit of that, just a bit, in order for Maitreya to be signaled, okay, humanity is ready, I need to come back. I can come back now. So it wasn't just this open, I'm going to come back whenever I can come back. It's humanity has to do a few steps before I can come back. Now, and since then, he's been, of course, working behind the scenes, but also now he's being interviewed on TV. But I'm sure there are some things that humanity has to do before he can start to speak more openly about his priorities. And then it would make it much, much easier for you and others who know about Maitreya to start to recognize him. So hopefully that sheds some light on it. Now, getting back to, I think, which is a really what I wanted to talk about is how much worse can it get before he intervenes? I think you should ask yourself, how much worse can it be before you do something? Now, I don't presume to know whether you're doing anything or not. So please don't get offended by this. But, we should all be thinking that exact same thing. How much worse is the world going to get before we do something about this? Before we personally do something and not be lazy and put it on somebody else, like our politicians, because they're never going to do anything about it. They're too corrupt. They're making too much money. As it says in Revelation, they're betraying the trust of they're committing adulteries against their people because of the markets. They're making profit hand over fist. We got politicians in this country that know that a bill is coming up. They're going to get the bill passed for whatever more military funding for this, and then they take their money and invest it stocks in those companies, knowing that the public doesn't know that they're getting ready to pass this bill, and then the stock goes up and they sell the stock. I mean, it's just how corrupt they are. They're never going to help in that way. We have to do something. But the real question is, and something that I don't really have an answer to give to people, this is for each and every one of us to think for ourselves, but I hope we put some time and effort into thinking about this, is how much worse is the world going to get before we do something? Individually do something about it. But to loop it back around to what I said earlier, it will be okay. Everything is going to be fine. The news media has this wonderful way of making everything really seem just as, bad as it could possibly be, because that drums up ratings. I live in Atlanta. Anytime there's a threat of snow, it's the worst snow that's ever going to happen, right? So it's like people go running out, and it doesn't really snow that much, They thought when the United States went into Iraq, as bad as that was and as just as that was going to be the start of World War III. They were talking about this back in the 90s when George Herbert Walker Bush went in there, and nothing. It never did anything. It never went to World War III. I don't speak Russian, so I don't know if Putin's really saying anything about nuclear. I'm just going off of what the media is saying. Is he really saying it, or just saying that to scare the crap out of people so they watch TV and go on their YouTube channels and watch I don't know. You know what I mean? I think that the Ukrainian thing is serious, very serious. Anytime there's any bullets flying anywhere, it's serious, because it can escalate to the point where it does involve other nations and it becomes nuclear and ends life on this planet. So there's always that possibility. Is it a likely possibility, or is it just a little bit of a possibility? Only a master would be able to know. But they're very adept at, energetically moving energy around to stimulate this group, to withdraw the energy from this so that a war doesn't get greater than it needs to be or it would be. So I know you don't know me. I know that my words might not comfort you very much, but, it's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine, but it might get worse before it gets better. But it's only going to get better until every one of us start to do something. So that's why I think it's best to, based on your questions, XXYX, to really think for yourself, how much worse is it going to be before you do something? How much is it worse before? And I've been thinking the same thing for myself, so I'm in that boat too. But I cannot thank you enough for your questions, because they really got me thinking about it too over the last few days that I've been thinking about how I'm going to answer your questions. So hopefully it'll get others to think about it as well. Even those who don't believe in Maitreya the way that I believe in Maitreya, maybe instead of asking God or Jesus to come down and save us, maybe we should start doing something about it. That's the most important thing. Maitreya can never do anything for us. We have to do it. He can only teach and guide and inspire us to do it for us, to wake us up to that we have to do it. That's his role. Enviable or not enviable, that's his role, is to wake humanity up, to open the hearts of humanity. Our job as humanity is to actually do it, and we're all a part of humanity, so it's our responsibility, each and every one of us, to do something. So hopefully that answers your question. You take care. Have a wonderful day.
Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.